Every day, we see the darker side of the world around us. We witness how people can hurt others in ways that are hard to understand. It's a sad part of life, but it's something we can't ignore. As someone who dives into the world of crime, I'm here to share the most shocking stories and try to understand what drives people to do such things. I'm Michael, and today, I've got another unreal true crime story for you. When police arrived at Michael Polding's apartment in Brighton, they noticed piles of unopened mail and an eerie silence. No one answered the door. Something felt off. When officers forced their way inside, they found a horrifying scene. In the basement, wrapped in sheets and left to rot, was Michael's body. He had been missing for nearly 2 months, and now the truth was finally coming to light. But how did he end up there? And where was Riccardo Pisano, the man who had been living with him? As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing story of trust, lies, and betrayal. Michael had opened his home and heart to someone he believed cared for him. Instead, he had been used, manipulated, and ultimately left to die. But what really happened in that apartment? And how did Riccardo manage to escape justice for so long? Riccardo Pisano was born in South Africa in 1977. His early life, much like his true identity, remains shrouded in mystery. Most of what is known about his past comes from his own interviews, but their accuracy is often questioned. While he insisted that Riccardo was not his real name, we will refer to him as such for clarity. Raised in a household that, like many in South Africa, struggled with poverty, Riccardo faced hardships from an early age. As he grew older, these challenges only intensified. In his teenage years, he met a young woman with whom he had a daughter. The responsibility of fatherhood pushed him to seek ways to provide for his new family. Accounts of his work history are vague, but there are strong indications that Riccardo became involved with drug trafficking gangs that controlled the streets of Cape Town. According to later statements, he claimed to have been threatened by a group known as Pagada, which emerged at the time as a vigilante movement aiming to combat crime through street justice. While some saw this organization as a force for good, law enforcement viewed it as a radical entity that took justice into its own hands. Feeling endangered by this group, Riccardo, then 23 years old, fled South Africa, leaving behind his wife and daughter. From that point on, his life became a series of struggles and deceptions, characterized by the use of false identities to evade the authorities. His journey led him to New Zealand, where he was soon arrested for extortion. Sentenced to 15 months in prison, he managed to escape after serving only 8 months by taking advantage of a prison event in 2001. Despite an intensive manhunt, he vanished without a trace. Resourceful and elusive, Riccardo made his way to Australia, where he lived under a different identity for about a year and a half before moving illegally to the United Kingdom in 2004. Once in the UK, with no legal status and no financial resources, he was forced to find ways to survive while staying under the radar. It was during this time that he crossed paths with 2 individuals who made a living through sex work. Seeing it as an easy way to make money, Riccardo joined them. Initially, he catered to female clients, but he soon realized that male clients were more willing to pay for discretion. One of these clients was Michael Polding, a 59-year-old man whom Riccardo met in December 2009 after Michael responded to an ad Ricardo had placed in a gay magazine offering escort services. Michael was born in Scotland in 1950 into a large and wealthy family, being one of 9 siblings. Though his childhood was a happy one, his teenage years became more difficult as he came to terms with his attraction to men, something his family and the conservative society around him did not accept. Seeking a life of greater freedom, Michael moved to London at the age of 20, settling in Croydon, South London, where he secured a stable job in the urology department of a hospital. His career provided him with financial security, and despite the distance, he maintained strong ties with his family in Scotland, who described him as kind and loving. As the years passed, Michael found happiness with his partner, Henry, with whom he shared his life until Henry's passing in 2001. This loss devastated him, leading to a deep depression. He turned to alcohol to cope, and as his health declined, exacerbated by osteoporosis, his relationships became fleeting. Nearing 60, loneliness weighed heavily on him, prompting him to seek the company of younger men. This search led him to Ricardo, in whom he hoped to find companionship. What began as a straightforward exchange, money for companionship, soon developed into something deeper, at least for Michael. Ricardo quickly realized Michael's loneliness and generosity and saw an opportunity to take advantage of it. Within months of meeting, Ricardo had moved into Michael's apartment. To explain his presence, he told different stories. Some believed he was Michael's caretaker due to health issues, while others were told he was his godson. In October 2011, after losing his job, Michael decided to relocate to Brighton, specifically to the Kemptown area, known for its vibrant LGBTQ community. He hoped that moving there would allow him to live more openly as a gay man. Using some of the proceeds from the sale of his former apartment, he paid a full year's rent up front for his new home, where Ricardo also moved in with him. The remainder of his savings he entrusted to his sister Mary for safekeeping. Aware of this financial cushion, Ricardo and his associates persuaded Michael to invest his savings in a beauty salon, a decision that would later have dire consequences. In an effort to oversee the supposed beauty salon business, one of Ricardo's associates temporarily moved into the apartment that Ricardo and Michael shared. However, from the very beginning, the venture was doomed to fail. By May 2012, Ricardo convinced Michael that they needed additional funds to keep the business afloat. Trusting him, Michael reached out to his sister and transferred several sums, first $600, then another $120, and finally, a larger sum of $1,900. After this last transaction, all communication between Michael and his family abruptly ceased. Concern quickly spread among his loved ones. It was highly uncharacteristic of Michael to ignore calls and emails, raising alarms. As weeks passed with no word from him, his sister officially reported his disappearance to Sussex Police on July 16, 2012. When officers arrived at Michael's residence, they immediately noticed stacks of unopened mail piling up at the entrance, a telltale sign that something was wrong. Upon forcing entry, they made a grim discovery. Michael's body was found wrapped in bedsheets in the basement, already in an advanced state of decomposition. The autopsy revealed multiple injuries, including broken ribs and a fractured collarbone, prompting police to launch a full-scale homicide investigation. As detectives questioned neighbors, they learned that Michael had moved into the area with 2 younger men. Witnesses reported that the relationship between the 3 often seemed tense, sometimes even violent. Authorities attempted to locate both individuals. Ricardo's associate was found and taken into custody as a suspect, but was later released on bail due to a lack of concrete evidence. Ricardo, however, had disappeared without a trace. A key testimony came from Ricardo's supposed business partner. He recounted that on May 22, 2012, he had visited the apartment and found Michael in a severely weakened state. When he suggested calling an ambulance, Ricardo refused. This statement led investigators to a critical discovery. Michael had been hospitalized just weeks earlier with head injuries and fractured ribs. Piecing together the evidence, authorities determined that Michael had likely died sometime between May 23 and May 30, 2012, nearly 2 months before his body was found. This timeline reinforced the theory that Ricardo was the last person to see Michael alive, making him a prime suspect and intensifying the urgency to locate him. As the investigation deepened, police uncovered disturbing details about Ricardo's past. Though he had been close to Michael, their relationship was marked by manipulation, control, and escalating violence. To build a case against him, detectives compiled a psychological and behavioral profile, highlighting his history of financial exploitation and the turbulent nature of his involvement with Michael. Given the seriousness of the case, Sussex police launched a major operation, Operation Diary, dedicating extensive resources to track him down. For over a year, Ricardo's face appeared across media outlets and Crime Watch programs. Authorities described him as approximately 35 years old, of slim build, with olive-toned skin. Reports suggested he was last seen in Brighton in mid-May and could have altered his appearance, possibly growing a beard or disguising himself. He was known for his South African accent and history of using false identities. As the case gained international attention, the search extended beyond the UK. Given his past ties to South Africa and New Zealand, multiple law enforcement agencies collaborated to locate him. Media outlets gave him various nicknames, while a South African newspaper dubbed him the cunning escapist. London tabloids branded him New Zealand's most wanted, as he was the only one of 55 fugitives in Waikato who had evaded capture in over a decade. To encourage public assistance, authorities offered a $6,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. Leads began trickling in. A crucial piece of evidence emerged from surveillance footage recorded in July 2012, showing Ricardo in a Southampton shopping center. This confirmed that he had not left the UK and was still actively evading authorities. Despite these clues, he remained elusive. The urgency to capture him intensified in April 2013 when forensic experts released the final autopsy results. The medical examiner ruled Michael's death a homicide, confirming that blunt force trauma to the chest was the cause. With this revelation, Ricardo was officially named the prime suspect, prompting law enforcement to ramp up their efforts. The manhunt finally ended on May 9, 2013, when Ricardo was located and arrested following an altercation at a residence in Southampton. Despite his attempts to conceal his identity, authorities confirmed his true background and took him into custody. Following his arrest, Ricardo was transferred to Brighton, where Sussex's major crime unit began their interrogations, determined to unravel the full story behind Michael's tragic death. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Ricardo maintained that he was not in the city at the time of the crime. In an emotional statement, Michael's family expressed both their anguish and relief, while knowing that the person believed to be responsible was behind bars provided some closure. They struggled to understand what had truly led to Michael's tragic end. Now, investigators turned their focus to uncovering the motive behind the crime. As detectives delved deeper, they confirmed that Ricardo and Michael's relationship had evolved into a toxic dynamic riddled with manipulation and abuse. From the start, Ricardo had relied entirely on Michael for financial support, claiming he had no job or income. Under the guise of being a caregiver, he gradually drained Michael's savings, taking advantage of his generosity. Along with two associates, Ricardo convinced Michael to invest nearly all his money into a business that failed almost immediately. With his bank account nearly empty, financial strain may have been the breaking point. Witnesses recalled seeing Michael in distress during the time frame in which his death was believed to have occurred. This discovery raised significant concerns. It suggested that Ricardo had intentionally denied Michael the care he needed, possibly sealing his fate. Further investigation uncovered a crucial contradiction in Ricardo's alibi. Phone records proved he had, in fact, been in Brighton at the time of Michael's death, despite his earlier claims. Additionally, police found messages he had sent shortly after Michael's body was discovered, in which he feigned concern over his absence. This appeared to be an attempt to establish an alibi and divert suspicion away from himself. With mounting evidence, Ricardo was officially charged with murder and grievous bodily harm. His trial began in September 2013. During the trial, prosecutors painted Ricardo as a master manipulator, a man who had built his life on deception, using false identities to evade justice. They argued that Michael, a vulnerable and trusting individual, had fallen victim to Ricardo's calculated schemes. The prosecution maintained that once Michael's financial resources were depleted, Ricardo saw no further use for him and callously ended his life, leaving his body to decay for weeks. The jury was also presented with evidence of Ricardo's actions after the crime. Following Michael's death, he had sent text messages in an apparent effort to create a false narrative, pretending to be concerned about his well-being. The prosecution asserted that this was a deliberate ploy to cover his tracks, motivated by his fear of being exposed, not just for the crime, but also due to his illegal immigration status. When it was Ricardo's turn to testify, he attempted to steer the focus elsewhere. He spoke at length about his past, detailing his reasons for fleeing South Africa and claiming that returning would put his life at risk. Though he reiterated that Ricardo was not his real name, he once again refused to disclose his true identity. Regarding Michael, Ricardo portrayed himself as a devoted companion who had shared an emotional bond with the older man. He claimed that Michael had been aware of his troubled past, even offering to marry him so that he could remain in the UK legally. He also insisted that Michael had financially supported him not out of manipulation, but out of genuine care, even providing money for him to send to his family abroad. When addressing the circumstances of Michael's death, Ricardo put forth an entirely different version of events. According to his testimony, on May 29, 2012, he had gone for a walk along the beach. Upon returning home, he claimed to have found Michael hanging from the staircase railing. In an emotional recounting, he described the moment as devastating, insisting that he had desperately tried to revive him but found no pulse. He explained that he had covered Michael's body with a towel and later wrapped him in a blanket, but, fearing the consequences of contacting the authorities due to his immigration status, he chose not to report the death. Ricardo admitted feeling guilty for not arranging a proper burial, but insisted that he had not caused Michael's death. Michael's family, however, rejected Ricardo's claims, stating that he had never exhibited any signs of suicidal thoughts or mental distress. The prosecution also dismantled Ricardo's version of events, citing forensic evidence that ruled out suicide. The autopsy report had confirmed that Michael died from blunt force trauma to the chest, not from asphyxiation. The jury deliberated on December 9, 2013, weighing Ricardo's role in the crime. After several hours of discussion, they reached a verdict. Ricardo Pisano, now 37 years old, was found not guilty of murder, but was convicted of manslaughter, grievous bodily harm, and preventing a lawful burial. 1 week later, on December 16, 2013, the court sentenced Ricardo to 18 and a half years in prison. In his final remarks, the judge emphasized the disturbing nature of Ricardo's actions, describing Michael as a victim of sustained manipulation, financial exploitation, and ultimately, violence. He condemned Ricardo's callous treatment of the man who had supported him, stating that leaving Michael's body to decay only added to the cruelty of his crime. The lead prosecutor in the case fully supported the sentence, echoing the judge's condemnation of Ricardo's actions. He emphasized that what made the crime particularly heinous was not just the financial and emotional exploitation of Michael, but the utter disregard Ricardo showed for him in death, leaving his body to decay in his own home, abandoned and forgotten. For Michael's sister, Mary, the verdict brought a sense of justice, but it could never be enough to compensate for the horror of what had happened. She described Ricardo as a despicable and ruthless individual, incapable of remorse. Though relieved that he would spend years behind bars, she and her husband Sam felt a deep responsibility to speak out. They decided to share their experience publicly, hoping that their story might prevent others from falling into similar situations. Their message became a call to action, urging those in abusive relationships to seek help before it was too late. Mary stressed that no one should suffer in silence and encouraged people to reach out to their loved ones for support. She firmly believed that open conversations about abuse, no matter the age, gender, or circumstances of the victim, were crucial for both protection and healing. If their testimony could help even one person escape a dangerous situation, she said, then sharing their pain would have been worth it. This case shed light on the complexities of relationships where power imbalances and emotional dependence can create a dangerous dynamic. While Michael and Ricardo's relationship may have initially appeared consensual, the evidence showed how Ricardo systematically manipulated him, taking advantage of his loneliness and financial security. Michael's murder was an extreme but tragically predictable outcome of unchecked abuse, where greed and control ultimately led to a devastating loss of life. The investigation also confirmed that Michael had endured prior physical mistreatment, red flags that, in hindsight, should have been recognized and acted upon. His death underscored the urgent need for greater awareness and intervention in situations where vulnerable individuals, particularly the elderly, are at risk of exploitation. Losing his long-term partner and struggling with health issues had left Michael increasingly isolated, making him an easy target for someone like Ricardo, an opportunist with no regard for the well-being of others. Only through awareness, education, and proactive measures can similar tragedies be prevented. Michael's family hopes that by sharing his story, they can help spark conversations and inspire real change, ensuring that no one else falls victim to the same kind of betrayal and cruelty. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.